George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
Make Israel great again. Why don't you, Donald? A series of monsters of the deepest swamp in Washington are one after the other signaled or even openly tapped to be the inner circle around Donald Trump in the Oval Office of the White House. It's hardly what he campaigned on. It's looking like RFK, Tulsi Gabbard, Elon Musk were merely icing on the top of the cake to sugarcoat it. Well, for people like me. More fool us, you may very well say, although I'm going to cogently argue that it's better even a bad Donald Trump than the other woman. What was her name again? We are continuing to view images of the most extreme slaughter in the Middle East. Today I saw a video of a Palestinian heart which had been blown out of the body and was still beating. As a metaphor, actually, it's very hard to beat that. The Palestinian heart beats on despite the massive slaughter that they have been subjected to. Not that it's genocide, you understand. The prominent human rights lawyer and Prime Minister of the United Kingdom was very clear about that in the House of Commons this afternoon. And Iran hasn't spoken yet. Is it going to? Well, you've come to the right place to find out. Fasten your seatbelt. It's going to be a bumpy night. It is the mother of all talk shows.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
The little Rutte who runs NATO, Mark Rutte, erstwhile Prime Minister of the Netherlands, though before that he seems to have been some kind of travelling salesman. I'm not making that up. The last guy was a tailor from Norway. This guy is a man who used to travel around with a suitcase offering gloves and hosiery to little retailers, at least if I'm properly informed. He has said that he personally will expel the United States of America from NATO. Now, I'm not sure if he realized just how much of a rejoicing would greet such an act. But of course, it betrays a level of delusion amongst the warmongering leaders in Europe. This man was the Prime Minister of an important European country just the other day. Now he's openly, publicly threatening to expel the funder, armor, and overwhelmingly biggest component of NATO, so that he can go on fighting Russia if the Americans decide that they don't want to. As a level of self-delusion, it's matched only by the German government, which has actually collapsed as a result of its policy towards Ukraine, but is still snarling from the floor. Not that we can have a general election anytime soon in Germany, said little soldier Schulz. Why? There isn't enough paper in Germany for the ballot papers. This Germany used to be the powerhouse of the continent of Europe. Now it can't have an election because it doesn't have enough paper for the ballot papers. Now, if you think that is the pits, you ain't seen nothing yet. Although not in the EU, Keir Starmer is the Prime Minister of, I'd argue, the second most important European country, and he's a human rights lawyer. He was on his feet in the House of Commons today and was asked by a member about the Genocide Convention, about the definition of genocide. This was necessary to clarify statements made by Idi Amin Lame just the other week, who said that the situation in Gaza could not be a genocide because not enough people have been killed. Millions of people have to be killed for it to be a genocide, said the Foreign Secretary. He at least had the excuse that he's not a lawyer, never mind a human rights lawyer. But of course, that's not what they said about Srebrenica. That's not what they said about the genocide that they called out and have marketed ever since for decades, having caused a war over it, was taking place in Kosovo. They told us Kosovo was a genocide. They told us Bosnia was a genocide. But there weren't millions of people killed there. So by Lame's definition, how could it be a genocide? Or what about the Uyghurs in China, where absolutely nobody has been killed, where their definition of genocide is the fake allegation that Uyghur clothes and culture is suppressed. That's a genocide. But murdering 170,000 people out of a population of 2.2 million, that's not a genocide. According to David Lammy, well, the Prime Minister himself, eminent King's Counsel, human rights lawyer, was asked if Gaza constituted a genocide today. And he answered, I am well aware of the definition of genocide, which is why I have never described what's happening in Gaza as a genocide. He might just as well have stood up and said, fuck Palestine. I don't give a toss about it. Well, his members of parliament sat mutely while he did it. So I hope that every voter in the United Kingdom who cares about Palestine will have made careful note of the Prime Minister's stance today. And when they next get the chance to vote against this repulsive excuse for a Labour Party, that they will do so. Now, I suspect the big news of the night, although not that much of it is hard news. Let me make that caveat right away. I was told 10 minutes before I came on air that Tucker Carlson was to be Donald Trump's next press secretary. But that turned out to be fake news. And other so-called announcements may turn out to be fake news. And I earnestly pray that they are. Whilst Tucker Carlson would have been a marvelous press secretary, the preeminent broadcaster of our age, would have been great to see him every day in the Situation Room, in the Oval Office, in the press conferences, facing the Washington Press Bureau. They wouldn't have known what hit them. But it was fake news. But I've been waiting for the appointment of Tulsi Gabbard. I fully expected her to be made the Secretary of State, the Foreign Secretary of the United States of America. She's the best qualified to be so, and she's got the best political views, or the least worst political views of those in the running for that position. But Tulsi Gabbard has not yet darkened the doorstep of the Trump White House to be. Tulsi Gabbard would appear to have been used as lipstick on the pig of the worst neoliberal, neocon, warmongering collection of people since the guys that are already there. In fact, if Marco Rubio does turn out to be the new Secretary of State, well, it would be a close-run thing whether Antony Blinken or him was the worst criminal. And yet, That's not been denied, and it is now repeatedly being pressed and apparently accepted by the MAGA crowd. Now, Marco Rubio didn't just insult Trump to the nth degree, didn't just call him corrupt, incompetent, stupid over and over again. Trump insulted him over and over again, and crucially said he was bought and paid for by the lobby. Well, if he's bought and paid for by the lobby, why are you thinking of giving him the most powerful position after yours in the entire United States of America? This is inexplicable. Rubio is a man bent on regime change in Cuba, in Venezuela, in Nicaragua. He's a walking recipe for war and turmoil throughout Latin America, from which come the tidal wave of refugees crossing your border that you're always complaining about. You want more refugees? Make Marco Rubio your Secretary of State. And then there's the Defense Secretary. The new Defense Secretary, actually formally named already by Trump, not speculation, believes in the RedHeifers. You remember them? The RedHeifers, the two entirely red cows, specially bred, that are to be slaughtered at the walls of Jerusalem so that the third temple can be constructed on the ground of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the third most holy shrine in Islam. If you want war throughout the world, then you've chosen the best Defense Secretary, Donald, to bring it about. He believes there's no such thing as a Palestinian. He's the man you've picked to be your Defense Secretary, along with your new ambassador to Israel. A joker used to play the banjo on television and sing country and western evangelical ditties, called Mike Huckabee. I'm not making that name up. Mike Huckabee is the new U.S. ambassador to Israel. He also does not believe that there is any such thing as a Palestinian. He also believes that there's nothing called the West Bank. It's Judea and Samaria. It all belongs to Israel, and it should be annexed in defiance of international law, including United States law. What's going on, Donald? Where is RFK Jr.? What job is he getting? Is he just going to be copied in the emails, in the health service, in the relations with Big Pharma? You told us he was going to war to make America healthy again. As what? What is he going to war as? Thanksgiving? A turkey? What? Whatever happened to Tulsi Gabbard? Whatever happened to Elon Musk? A man whom, seems to me, you owe more to than anybody else in your circle. What happened to Donald Trump Jr., who told us he had a veto on these positions, who has been remorselessly denouncing the warmongers, remorselessly denouncing the neocons, the war hawks. He's even putting out memes on Twitter mocking people like Pompeo and people like Nikki Haley. Has he lost his veto? Has he lost his voice? I was just saying how impressive he was, how he might be the next president after his father. Turns out he's not a man, he's a mouse who's allowing all of this MAGA rampage to take place. Now, I'm sure, I can almost hear him say it, that Trump is saying he's putting all these warmongering, war hawk neocons in place so he can overrule them. But they'll be in the tent and won't be able to do anything about it. But that presupposes you're smarter than all of them combined, Donald. And that's a stretch. It's a stretch to believe that you've brought about half a dozen John Boltons, about half a dozen Mike Pompeos into your tent because you're playing some 5G chess match. I find it difficult to believe. And even on the Ukraine, which is the principal reason that I was happy that he defeated Kamala Harris, the early signs even on that are not good. The New York Times said that he had a conversation with President Putin, but he didn't. He still hasn't. He spoke to every Uncle Tom Cobley and all, but he hasn't spoken to Vladimir Putin. But he has spoken to Zelensky. He is talking about appointing a Ukraine peace envoy. Why do you need a peace envoy? Just stop the money. Just cancel the checks. And then Zelensky must fall. Then a new government can be chosen in Kiev. And with that new government, Russia can negotiate. Why not cut to the chase, Donald? Who is this Ukraine peace envoy? At this rate, it'll be Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama or George W. Bush at this rate. Why not put Dick Cheney and his daughter in your cabinet while you're at it? Have you betrayed everybody, Donald, before you're even in post? Were you lying to us all that you were the anti-war candidate? Were you lying to the voters in Michigan on the eve of poll when you said that you needed the war in the Middle East to stop now? Ceasefire now? Were you lying to us? Were you lying to those that wanted you to make America great again? Who wanted to put America first when all the while you were determined to put Israel first, to make Israel great again? It's beginning to look that way. Unless you speak and act very quickly indeed, that's what people are swiftly going to conclude. Indeed, many have already concluded. Now, it's been some time, and you can understand the Iranian strategic patience. It's been some time since the promised retribution for the third missile attack on Iran by Netanyahu's apartheid state was answered. Is it going to be answered? Will it be the comprehensive answer that we have been repeatedly promised, that has been repeatedly threatened? Or is there something going on in the corridors? Is there a back channel somewhere in which, for some presumably weighty prize in return, Iran isn't, after all, going to retaliate? Well, a clue is that the airspace over the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps headquarters has been cleared tonight for 48 hours, indicating, presumably, that some kind of test is going to be fired. But there have been other tests already fired. The question the world is asking: will Iran answer Netanyahu? I can see arguments either way. I'll be perfectly blunt and frank with you. But with Marco Rubio as Secretary of State, with Mike Huckabee ensconced in Jerusalem as the ambassador, with Adelson's $100 million burning a hole in Donald Trump's pocket. I have my doubts, you know, as to what the United States' true intentions in the Middle East are. Lastly, the runt. He says that he will not allow the United States to pull the plug on Zelensky. So we've got a poll running. Will NATO veto Ukraine peace? Will NATO veto the Ukraine peace? Vote yes or no on my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway, on my Twitter, my X, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. And if you are watching on the YouTube stream, let me say a big thank you to the more than 500,000 subscribers that I now have on my channel. In fact, 500,870. We were just a kick in the backside of 500,000 on Sunday. Now we are on our way to 501,000. Thanks to each and every one of you. If someone can get me who the 500,000th subscriber was, I'll give them a shout out on the show. So that's the poll. Get voting now. I'll be right back. Stay tuned.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special announcement. A big thank you to all our wonderful listeners, as the Mother of All Talk Shows podcast is now one of the most listened to political podcasts in the entire world. We are the #1 English-speaking political podcast in the Middle East, and in the last year alone have charted in the top 10 in podcast land in Pakistan, Russia, and China. Like, rate, and subscribe to the MOATS podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts to be a part of the fastest rising independent news show in the world.
You are listening to the Mother of All Talk Shows with George Galloway.
Will NATO veto Ukraine peace? Yes or no? Get voting now. Telegram, X, YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. If you want to call the show, it's toll free in the US and Canada. +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in the UK and Ireland. 0808 196 5522. And the worldwide number 0044 203 966. Well, will Iran speak? And how does the Trump show look from the Persian Gulf? Who better to ask than Professor Syed Mohammed Marandi, Chair of American Studies at the University of Tehran. Professor, thank you for joining us again. Before we come on to events in the Gulf, what do you think of Trump's appointments thus far?
I actually think that people shouldn't have expected anything different. But I'm somewhat encouraged, because I think that the United States is more powerful today than it was last week. And it's not going to be more powerful in 2 months from now from what it is today. What is going to happen is that Trump is going to lead a government, from what we're seeing so far, that is only going to be more divisive inside the United States, and that is going to cause a lot of trouble, because the economy is not doing well and it's going to do worse. And because Democrats who have been hypocritically silent about the genocide in Gaza, I'm sure they'll be using Gaza or anything else that they can to hit back at Trump. So he's going to have a lot of trouble at home. And the hypocrisy of the previous administration, people like Jake Sullivan, or Netanyahu's lawyer, as they like to call him, Blinken, that hypocrisy is gone. This team is going to, I think, be more easy for people to read across the world. The United States has lost its soft power. I mean, there's no doubt about that. The last year in Gaza, their support for this ongoing Holocaust and now the genocidal attacks in Lebanon, where every day they're slaughtering 50 to 100 women and children, that has exposed them. But I think Trump is particularly bad, and his people are particularly bad at attempting to present the United States in a positive light. So I think this administration, this incoming administration, is going to marginalize the United States more than before, but it's not going to intimidate Iran, which I think is what you're going to be asking next. The Iranians are not going to be intimidated. The Iranians are going to strike back. They are going to punish the Israeli regime. And I have no doubt that although dark days are ahead and dark weeks and perhaps months are ahead, but I have no doubt that ultimately the Israeli regime will be defeated. Look at what Hezbollah has been doing in the last 24 hours. It's amazing. They're punishing the Israeli regime, and the regime is unable to advance in Lebanon. They're on the receiving end of strikes in Tel Aviv, despite the fact that they were supposed to go all the way to the Litani River in Lebanon. They were supposed to be there by now, but they're still stuck on the border. So I think people should not be intimidated by this gang that Trump is bringing to power. The United States is on the decline. If Trump was smart, he would be the anti-war president that he pretended to be, because that's what the United States needs. If it wants to prevent the economic collapse, if it wants to have a future for its people, it has to change course now. It has to shut down many of those military bases across the world, 800 to 900. It has to cut defense spending. It has to end the wars. It has to bring about stability in West Asia. But from what we're seeing, Trump does not seem to want that. And if he does want to do that, he will probably not be able to do that. Let me give you an interesting story, which it would be useful to your listeners. After Trump went to North Korea, a senior North Korean official met a senior Iranian official. And that official told me in a small gathering that he, out of curiosity, said, what was Trump like? Because you alluded to this in your introduction when you were talking about if Trump thinks he's smarter than them all. That official said that when Trump came and spoke, everything was fine. But as soon as he left the room and the negotiators began, and the National Security Advisor took charge, everything fell apart. In other words, the discussion was pleasantries, and there were nothing happened while Trump was meeting the North Korean leader. But as soon as the meeting between the two ended and the people who had to do the negotiations began to do their work, it was the same business as usual. It was sabotaged, and the whole thing fell apart. So let's pretend that Trump brings in all these horrible people in order to control them. Well, he didn't succeed last time round, and there's no reason to believe that he is going to succeed this time round. But I personally don't believe that that's really the case. I think he's very deeply influenced by the Zionist lobby, and they got what they want, just as they got what they wanted in previous administrations. But as I said, I think this administration doesn't even pretend to have a mask, and that is a good thing.
Yes, and the point you make about Trump's lack of soft power around the world, I mean, That I can testify from my own mailbag. It was perceived that I wanted Trump to win, and it was a very unpopular stand to take. People in Europe, people in the Western world in general, people on the Democratic side, 68, 9, 70 million of those, they'll all be gunning for Trump. And the turn that he's made, this warmongering turn that he's made, even if he thinks he can trump it with his own personality, is going to run into quite a lot of trouble. Now, going to the Middle East first as a whole, in the Levant, the situation as you just described it is that the Lebanese resistance have fought the Israeli occupation force to a standstill. It is the case that they do not control a single village in Lebanon after, 50 days of all-out war, when their war aim was to drive the resistance all the way north past the Litani River. And even in Gaza, which they have completely flattened, and where they are starving, willfully starving to death, hundreds of thousands of people, they're still losing soldiers there. They're still unable to pacify the territory that they have complete control of now. And so, help me on this. How can they imagine that on top of those two situations, they can fight the Islamic Republic of Iran? That just makes no sense to me.
Well, before I answer that, I'd like to also point out that, and I'm sure that some of your viewers will not be happy with what I'm about to say, but I would not vote for Trump under any circumstances, but I don't see any reason why anyone could possibly vote for Harris. Voting for Harris means, and if she it means that you're trying to help her get into office. Her getting into office means a type of, and that would not be the intention, but Harris and the corporate media and the establishment would present it as a vindication that a year of Holocaust was the right thing to do, and Americans accept it. So I think Harris had to go. I think Biden had to go, and it's tragic that the regime in Washington gives people a choice between Trump and Harris, and it just shows that there's no democracy in the United States. But I don't think that voting for Harris would have been a good thing at all, because they had to be punished for what they did. And of course their punishment after they die, I think, will be infinitely worse, but I think they deserve this punishment. But with regards to Israel, yes, they've lost in Gaza. This is the Israeli regime that would go all the way to the Suez Canal. Now they can't take Gaza after well over a year, despite the genocide. And in Lebanon now, they're killing between 50, as I said, to 100 civilians a day. And the difference between Lebanon and Gaza is that Lebanon is full of Western embassies. Beirut is full of embassies. They all see it. They know it. There are Western journalists based there. They see it happen. They call these Hezbollah targets because they want to hide the truth that they're just targeting women and children. They're slaughtering women and children because they are a part of a community that's supportive of the resistance. And these embassies and these Western journalists are all part of this conspiracy. And Hezbollah also, while fighting against this Israeli regime onslaught, has a problem that makes it more difficult than for Hamas and Islamic Jihad, and that is that they have enemies in Beirut who are conspiring against them with Western embassies as these genocidal attacks are being carried out. The same people who carried out the massacre in Sabra and Shatila, the camp, the Palestinian refugee camp, which killed 3,500 Palestinians and Shias in that camp. The same people are now having meetings with Western embassies to carry out a coup in Lebanon. Of course, they're going to fail, but it just shows how disgusting the West is, who their allies are, and how Western media is trying to hide the reality of these genocidal strikes in Lebanon. So Hezbollah has to be careful of what's happening behind it, but it is quite astounding how they are defeating the Israeli regime. It is extraordinary what these young men are doing on the battlefield, and how the Israelis have failed to make any inroads. They only come in during the day, go in a kilometer or two, blow up people's homes, and do what they did in Gaza, take pictures of themselves wearing women's clothes, and then they retreat at night. And they get beaten and hammered and humiliated, and they've achieved nothing. So how is the Israeli regime, which cannot cross the Lebanese border, how is the Israeli regime that has failed in Gaza and it has only carried out a genocide, how does it think it's going to defeat Iran? The hope of the regime is not that it can defeat Iran, because Iran can crush it. The hope of the regime is to draw in the Americans. And of course, the Trump cabinet makes it seem that that is what the Americans would possibly do. But personally, I think it's quite clear for the sane but sinister people in Washington. Not everyone is sane, but those who are sane and sinister, that an American attack on Iran will result in utter devastation throughout the Persian Gulf region. All those bases will be destroyed. But far more important than the bases is the fact that those tiny dictatorships across the Persian Gulf, they will no longer exist. There will be no more oil and no more gas, either in the Persian Gulf. American bases in Iraq will be overrun, and in the Caucasus, there will be no oil either. So if Trump wants to destroy the U.S. economy, that's the choice that he can take. But I think that his supporters will very, very swiftly turn against him, and it will destabilize the United States. And if they're worried about refugees and illegal immigrants now, imagine what it will be like for Europe and the United States if there's an economic collapse, a global economic collapse. It's a very scary scenario. No one will win. The world will lose. It will affect people for decades to come, everyone across the world. But it will be a major catastrophe for Trump and his people too.
Now, they say in the US that Iran is trying to kill Trump. I don't know whether to laugh or cry at the information that they have so far released. An Iranian American and 2 New York Jewish Americans. It doesn't seem to add up to a conspiracy led by the Ayatollahs in Tehran to me. How seriously should we treat this?
Well, George, I think the timing is key. The story doesn't add up, and it is ridiculous. But why is it that right after Trump is elected president, this comes out? And of course, we know that elements within the deep state tried to murder Trump. Probably the same people are giving out this sort of disinformation. But more importantly, I think, is the timing. Why is it that after he was chosen that they chose to declare this? And why is it that at the same time, the United States government has been saying that they will swiftly send all the assistance that Congress has passed for Ukraine to Kiev? Because regardless of what Trump wants, and regardless of what his intentions are, and regardless of the gangsters that are surrounding him right now, what they want, I think that the deep state, the current regime in Washington, they want to intensify tensions with Russia and with Iran to ensure that Trump will fail. Because the United States is so deeply divided that these people would rather have the United States fail under Trump than to succeed under Trump. And of course, I think Trump will fail anyway. I think the United States is destined to fail, whether with Trump or without. And I think Trump is worse for the United States than anyone else for the reasons that I explained earlier. But I think that these two things are connected. The accusations, the ridiculous accusations against Iran, and the swift move to quickly give Ukraine all that they can before a change in government.
Professor Marandi, as always, a tour de horizon, a tour de force. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Will NATO veto the Ukraine peace, yes or no? Well, an amazingly high number think that NATO will veto the Ukraine peace. Mark Rutte might not have to expel the United States from NATO after all. Now look, the 500,000th subscriber on my YouTube channel was someone called Afkalee, A-F-K-A-L-L-E-E. Afkalee, big shout out to you. Thank you for being my 500,000th subscriber. I'll be back in just a minute talking with the UAE after this short break.
George, I'm just looking at another dimension in this Gaza war conflict. Could this be a religious conflict in the guise of it's not Islam versus Christianity versus Judaism, but an ideology, a Zionist ideology in establishing their leader that is supposed to come in the future, and they will then govern and rule?
It's in their ideology, for sure. The Zionists are no more and no less than a nationalist ideology. They are nothing whatsoever to do with religion. Anybody who thinks Netanyahu is religious hasn't looked too closely into his private life. These people are extreme nationalists, exceptionalists. Some Americans believe in American exceptionalism. Zionists believe in Jewish exceptionalism. Nobody, in truth, is exceptional. There's nothing religious about it. It's about land. It's about nationalist supremacy, ethno-religious supremacy on the land of Palestine. And the Europeans colonized Palestine in the same way that the Europeans colonized South Africa. So fitting, the victims of white European colonialism are coming to the aid of other victims of white European colonialism. And they're doing the whole world a signal service.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
So it's toll-free in the US and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. It's free of charge in the UK and Ireland, 0808 196 5522. And the worldwide number 0044 203 966. Now, first caller up on the table is Rafe in the United Arab Emirates about Donald Trump. I told you it was the Global University of the Airwaves. Rafe, welcome to the show. What do you want to say? Well, either I'm not hearing you or you're not there. Rafe, are you there?
Hello? 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 Yes?
Yes, yes. Speak
Hello?
up, sir. Speak up.
Yes, yes. Sorry, George.
Go on. We've lost you. I beg your pardon. Okay, a podcast plug. For the first time ever, MOATS is in the top 50 in Spain this week. And we've also held our position in all the usual spots. Number 1 in the Gambia. I don't know why either, but I'm warming to the Gambia. And we're in the top 10 in Nicaragua and Macedonia, neither of them remotely English-speaking countries. Fantastic. We passed 250,000 streams on Spotify this week again. So let's aim for, 500,000 by Christmas. You can scan the QR code on the corner of your screen now to get the MOATS podcast from tomorrow morning. Let's try California, shall we? Where Josh is on the line, again, wanting to talk about Trump. Josh, welcome.
Hi, George.
Hi.
The ineffective and decades-long unwinnable military campaigns are arguably the most inefficient and inarguably the most expensive part of the United States domestic and foreign policy. Trump's foreign policy cabinet is a clique of sycophant tryhards dreaming wistfully intoxicated on legacy that represent him poised for war. And the only thing that I can appreciate about that is allowing tryhards the opportunity to become object lessons in failure to future generations. You know, an entire generation of politicians in the United States and beyond have stooped so low as to have hung their hats on anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and they'll be stooping to pick them up off the floor eventually. But the Trump administration, this new one, can either reveal its inability to break with its past or its ability to be revolutionary. Which one ends up being the meaning of our history remains to be seen.
Yeah, very well put. It was portrayed that Trump was coming back on a white charger with a short sword and was going to wreak revenge on the very creatures that he's now promoting. I don't understand it, Josh.
Neither do I. It's he won the election on the promise of peace. He won over so many voters on that, and then to alienate them so quickly, it's either a grievous miscalculation or he's I don't know, setting himself up to make a public sea change. But that's kind of optimistic thinking.
Yeah, you don't put Marco Rubio as Secretary of State if you intend to change America's foreign policy, unless you intend to change it for the even worse. So that makes no sense. You don't put a guy in as the Defense Secretary who believes that 2 RedHeifers are going to bring about the rapture and the beginning of the end of times. That's actually insanity. And yet both those things appear to be, in one case, the latter case, certainly are, and in the former, the Rubio case, almost certainly, these 2 people have got the 2 top jobs, the Pentagon and Foggy Bottom. Beats me, Josh. Thanks very much for your call. On YouTube, comments. Ronan Makarivi says, Adelson strikes again. The Israeli-American, who definitely isn't Mossad, has picked literally the most pro-Israel cabinet money can buy. At least, as Scott Ritter said, we now know the price of an American president. It's $100 million. Mark Riding says, 2 genocides. One it's illegal to question, and one it's illegal to mention. Who runs your country? And Crowhawk says, unquestioning support for Israel is the price of admission to Western politics. If you don't swear fealty to Israel, you don't get in. I guess that's where I went wrong. Free Palestine sends $10. Thank you very much for that. George, the President of the United States is akin to the Emperor of Japan. It's a ceremonial post. Power is consolidated there to be used freely by the deep state without legislative recourse. And Mourns Lad says Iran is taking far too long once again for the people of Gaza and Lebanon, much too late for many of them. Let's go to England, Blackpool, where Deborah, always worth hearing, is on the line. Go ahead, Debs.
Hi, George. I'm just,
Aye.
I'm really shocked. Well, not shocked, but Hurette's doing the piece about Netanyahu and saying that they are ethnically cleansing northern Gaza. And I know Netanyahu's threatened before about he'll close them down, but I don't think that will go down well in Israel. But something needs to be done about him anyway, and for that absolute Kremlin and cretin Starmer.
Oh, gosh.
Oh, my George, you were absolutely...
Every time you think he can't go lower, Debs, he gets even lower. He could crawl under a rattlesnake wearing a top hat. Deborah, thanks for that call. Haaretz, now twice, 2 weeks in a row, have described what's happening in North Gaza as ethnic cleansing. I know it's impossible to describe it in any other way, but at least Haaretz did so. No British newspaper will do. John is in New York on Trump. Go ahead, John.
Hey, George, it's great to talk with you again. I agree with you completely. Very disappointed in Trump's appointments. But my question, and then I'll hang up and listen to you, is one, to get a sense of where the UK is on our election. If this election between Trump and Harris took place in the UK, in your opinion, who would have won? Thank you.
In my opinion, Harris would have won, but not by a landslide. Harris would have won because the entire deep state and the entire media machine would have been firing for her. Trump would have been Nigel Farage plus. Quite a big, considerable plus, but still just Nigel Farage plus. So my estimation is that Trump would have done better than Rishi Sunak did. He might have gotten up around the 30% mark, but he would still have been beaten by Harris, because all these liberal nostrums, the nostrum that let's have a black woman, even better if she's a lesbian, better still if she's lame or in a wheelchair, any box that you can tick. This is still the prevailing orthodoxy here in the United Kingdom. But I think it's fading. Most people, when they saw our utterly unhinged Environment Secretary, the hapless Miliband, his performance at the COP in Baku was so unhinged as to call into question his sanity. He's talking about an 81% reduction in Britain's emissions. Not just net zero by 2030, but a reduction in the emissions in total, including the emissions we're currently making, will be 81% by 2030. This would penurize Britain. This would reduce Britain to utter devastation. It would be chaos. We'd have no cars and no electricity supply to supply the electric vehicles, which would eventually take their place. We'd have no boilers when there aren't enough heat pumps to keep our houses warm, even as it's accepted that heat pumps are nothing like as efficient as boilers for keeping larger houses warm. We would be in 15-minute cities in order to achieve that level of emission cut. We would be unable, not allowed, to travel. Road pricing would stop motor car journeys at the 15, 20-mile mark. Nobody would be able to afford to go on road trips. So everything would come to a localized halt. It is a recipe for a return to medieval times. And that's the policy of the United Kingdom government. And they flew all the way to Baku, first class, in a big gas-guzzling jet airliner in order to tell us. John, thanks for the call. Munir is in Atlanta, Georgia, on Palestine. Go ahead, Munir.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, George, and I appreciate your hard work and beautiful show. Thank you. My question is...
Thank you.
Yeah, my question... I'm originally from Algeria, too, and I know you love Algeria. So I've been here 30 years, and I've been watching the news. Yeah, I've been watching everything that's going on in the world, and I've been studying the U.S. policy, whether inside or outside. They're both really horrible for the American people and outside for the world. We've been involved. I've been here 34 years, and we've been involved at least in 20 wars, directly or indirectly, and we put presidents that we like in places that we need. And it's just sickening. And I've been telling people, I'm a hairdresser, by the way, and I tell my clients who are, Americans, I tell them that, we need to get rid of the White House completely, flatten it, and rebuild a brand new one with brand new people. We have a lot of brains in this country, and they can do so well. And yet, the only choices that we have is Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, who is convicted of several crimes. I mean, that in itself, it's a crime, let alone what he's going to do and what he did. So my question is, why don't we drop all those people who are against, human life, against, wars, against evil? They're with evil. Why don't we drop all of them out, completely radio silence, and focus on only people and countries who are actually doing something about it, and push them and boost them and make them feel like they have an army behind them besides their own army. Because this is what's happening in the world right now, in Gaza and Lebanon. This is I mean, there's no name for it yet. There's no name. This is
Munir, first of all, thanks. Munir, thank you for the call. Glory to the Algerian people and their revolution. I do indeed love the Algerians very much indeed. And I sometimes feel I should tell the pilot to take me to Algiers, as they used to do in former times. But I'm sorry to rain on your parade, but you had the chance on the 5th of November to do that. My candidate, Jill Stein, Dr. Jill Stein, was that candidate. She was the candidate who genuinely stood up for the Palestinian people, the Lebanese people, the Arabs, the Muslims, the downtrodden. She was the candidate that stood up for the poor in America. She was the candidate who stood for equality and justice in America. She was the candidate that would have stopped all of the wars. But not many people voted for her. And of course, there were some states where you didn't have the option to vote for her, but you still could have written her name in on the ballot paper. You get what you vote for in countries like yours and mine. There's no point in merely harboring the deepest of grudges about the candidate that the mass of the people chose. The mass of the people that voted at least chose. Imagine how bitter I feel about the fact that people chose Keir Starmer and his party over me and my party. I'm bitter about it, but there's no point in blaming them. We have to blame ourselves. We failed. we failed to communicate to enough people the case for doing something completely different. And we failed in the US just as we failed in the UK. Grey Scout sends $13.99 Canadian dollars. Thank you very much indeed. Sam Harris has stated on several occasions, Islam is a religion from the Middle Ages, and we don't have time to wait for their enlightenment, as happened with Christianity. Could this be the motive? Good luck with that. Retired Rebel says Americans think they need a one-man solution, a savior, a man messiah of the sort to solve all their issues. Well, they put all their eggs in the basket of a fake savior. And Ian McKillop says Starmer is considering making Epstein's best buddy, Peter Mandelson, as the next UK ambassador to the United States. Thought you'd like to know. I did know, Ian, though I'm still pinching myself to be sure that I'm not just dreaming it. That is Lord Peter Mandelson, sacked twice for corruption in the Blair government, even though he and Blair could not have been closer if they'd included Epstein alongside them in the bed. Mandelson and Blair were so close, and yet Blair had to sack him twice for corruption. He then went off to be the best friend of Petey, went off to be the best friend of Jeffrey Epstein. After Epstein had been convicted, he stayed in Epstein's New York townhouse when Epstein was in prison for sex charges. And Keir Starmer's going to make him the ambassador to the United States of America. Anthony Wedgwood says, when are you going to wake up about Trump? Fool me once. There's only the grey zone that gives a rational viewpoint that might still consider themselves on the left. Thanks for that, Anthony Wedgwood. Karaoke Star says, George, do you know if Starmer has taken any cash from the Israel lobby? Only hundreds of thousands of pounds. Let me take a quick break. I should have done so already. And we've got one terrific guest coming up in the second half of the show. Stay tuned for Bryce Greene, more calls, and for Gayatri. I'll be right back. Go ahead, John.
You recognize that, mass immigration is driven by wars, and that ultimately, people ought to be repatriated, and the conditions, and so on need to be laid to facilitate that. But I feel like it doesn't fully address, the concerns of people who are not happy with, like, the exponentially rising levels of immigration. They don't necessarily feel like they have a duty to go about understanding it and wrapping their head around all the complexities of international politics. They just know that they want their country to be, to culturally sort of resemble what their country nominally is. And I suppose it puts you, to some extent, in an inconvenient spot, given, where you found the most political strength and the demographics and so on. But I don't know.
Any spot? No, John. It doesn't put me in any spot at all. And even if it did, you think I would change my answer because it put me in a spot? I say things because I believe that they are right. The issue of immigration and the issue of refugees are not the same thing. And neither of them is the same thing as color, or race, or ethnicity. These are all different things. I was born and grew up before there was mass immigration, and Britain was lousy. It was lousy. All these culture wars have always raged. You just know about them more now. Now, I'm against mass immigration. Nothing to do with color or race, ethnicity or culture. It's about economics. The only people who are in favor of mass immigration are lunatic liberals, anarchists, and rich monopoly capitalists. That's obvious, isn't it? So I'm against mass immigration because in a capitalist society, that can only worsen the terms and conditions of my members, of the working class that I try to represent and champion.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, my good friend Ben Swan has just tweeted 59 seconds ago that Tulsi Gabbard will reportedly be Trump's Director of National Intelligence. What does that mean? I don't know either. Will NATO veto the Ukraine peace? Yes or no? It's overwhelming, I must say, that NATO will successfully veto the Ukraine peace. Let's take a moment to give the phone numbers again. It's toll-free, US and Canada, +1 844 944 3344. Free of charge in the UK and Ireland, 0808 196 5522, and the worldwide number 0044 203 966. Is that enough digits? Is it? Doesn't look right, that to me. Anyway, Sarkar is in Glasgow on US aid to Israel. You see, it is the global university of the airwaves. Go ahead, Sarkar.
Thank you so much, George. George, I'll be honest, I'm confused at what American and Israel love story, sadistic love story this is. I don't know. 1 month ago, Israel were given a stern warning. Of course, I didn't believe that the warning would be, brought to fruition. USA were told that if Israel keeps on blocking the aid agency, the UNRWA people, there would be an embargo on the arms being sent to them. 30 days time was given. Yeah. Well, in that 30 days, Israel has done their own sort of bombings, killed many more people. Now, with those many people dead, I saw a latest article in New York Times where the AIPAC have once again poked their nose now that arms embargo will not be going through. So what does that mean? In the last 2 months of Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, whoever is the president, I don't know, could they not do at least the basic thing and say, you know what, do something to stop the war so their tainted legacy can get some kind of, saving grace or something? Because I don't know what will happen from January when Trump takes office.
Well, we don't know what will happen when Trump takes office, but we do know what happened when Biden and Harris were in office. As indeed, as you rightly say, they are this day. And it was Blinken who threatened Israel that if in the next 30 days they did not stop blocking the aid necessary to stop famine from engulfing the enclave, that the US would impose arms embargoes, not total, but arms embargoes upon them. The 30 days has passed, and there will be no arms embargo. Ergo, the people in power now in the United States lied to the American people, lied to the world, lied to the region, lied to the starving Palestinians, that in 30 days they would get some relief, or else it was all a big lie. Andy's in Chicago. Let's hear what he's got to say. Andy, welcome.
Oh, thank you, George, and thank you for being a voice in the wilderness. People here in Chicago, and I know all around the world, there's a good reason why your voice is such appreciated one, and you're part of a great reveal that's coming. And I can tell you in Chicago, the liberals are losing their minds because they don't have a game plan. They don't have anything left that's considered appealing. But what I wanted to introduce, possibly, is this understanding of why people like who are high up in the tech technological department, people like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, felt compelled to play such a direct role in politics. Musk went so far as to say, if Trump doesn't win, I'm finished. And I think what's meant here is that they understand that there has been a technological revolution in the world, not just in the United States, but in the world, that has cheapened labor and made labor around the world redundant and created, 187 million refugees in the world wandering around looking for a place to lay their head. All these people have to be dealt with in some way. And the technological czars and emperors or whatever they are, they understand this. And so they're not willing to just delegate things to Trump. They're going to run it directly. And already the Pentagon in the United States has said, these guys are calling the shots. They know how to put these rockets up. They know how to put up the Starlink and all this stuff that we're using in the war in Ukraine and elsewhere. So I think that there's a smaller of people who represent the enemy, that the confused populace of the United States or anywhere else is not the enemy. And that's got to be understood in order to unite. What's getting in the way of unity in the United States is a bunch of liberals trying to lure us back into the Democratic Party and a bunch of nonprofit organizations that claim to speak for the working class. We have to develop, and I don't know how the hell we're going to do it, but we have to develop an independent partisan unity in the working class. And I know people that are trying to do that. I just wanted to let you know from Chicago.
I agree with that entirely. I don't have, although I'm suing him in the Dublin courts, I don't have the same entirely malign attitude to Musk that you evidently do. I think he has made Twitter much better than it was before. Before it was literally a plaything of the three-letter agencies. It was run by the FBI. It was run by the CIA. It was run by the National Security Agency and by MI6 and GCHQ and the other agencies here in this country, and indeed around the Five Eyes. They were all in it together. They completely conspired. They conspired comprehensively to spy on the people through the use of that platform and to repress truth and highlight lies, like the lie that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. All of that has gone under Musk. It's just a pity he's still in control of the same company, so it's him that I need to sue, and I'm suing. So I don't have an irredeemably hostile attitude to him. I'm hostile to him for the shortcomings of the anti-censorship regime. I'm hostile to him because good friends of mine are repeatedly algorithmically strangled and let down and no platformed and so on. I like his rockets. I like men that can send rockets. I wish the state was sending rockets. I wish the pioneering spirit of space travel of the 1960s still burned as brightly in the national consciousness of nations. I don't even know if Britain has a space program of any kind at all, so many years since I heard of it. So we have to have tech platforms. The truth is, in this age, they're going to be the playthings of big business, big billionaires. Who else can pay to purchase these things when they're already grown, as Twitter was already grown. And he paid $40 billion for Twitter, which was very much more than it was worth in a commercial sense, but he wanted it. And he wanted it, presumably, for the influence and then power that it would give him. And now he has successfully achieved that. But how is Trump going to use Elon Musk? So far, I'm underwhelmed by the role of both Musk and Gabbard and RFK Jr. Totally underwhelmed by it. And I suspect they are also. Thanks for the call. Viruel in Strasbourg in Europe wants to talk about Trump. Go ahead, Viruel.
Hello, Mr. George. I'm honored to know that you remember me and everything is going in this direction which it's going. Lady Tulsi Gabbard, she had many years in military, and she is trained, I can say, for being head of the secret services. Then is the war of
but she's not the head of the secret service. No, let me stop you. The director of national intelligence is not the head of the secret service. The head of the CIA is the head of the secret service. I don't know even what Tulsi Gabbard's new role even means. Go ahead, Viruel.
But what I want to say is that she's trained to take the place next to the Donald Trump, which I've dreamed about him before election has been passing through. And I dreamed that he come also in Strasbourg one day. I've seen him like in front of me in that dream. Then with Mr. Kennedy, I just want to say that he's willing to make justice to come out of the darkness where it is, because his uncle was assassinated, and he's living all his life, and I think he will be in peace when he will find out the all true, which is everybody searching for them, even me. I want to find out the truth about all the stories which are in a dark shadow right now. Then you remember, if I can say, I am the willing president of the new organization, which is called Uncles, Aunts, and Nieces, Nephews from all over the world. Well, this will be a solution for any and many situations which we have today problematic. So bear that in mind, that many answers can be found in the families of the ones who have done the things. Now, also, I am kind of locked up now at the political order in Strasbourg, again, because I find out that this woman, which she asked me to sell masks in 2015, because she had the deposit full with masks, she have made another victims. She's already killing and have killed people. Now, what I want to say is that I'm not scared, and I hope we will keep talking in the future. And what I want to say, Mr. George, I respect you enormously, and I wish you continue with the mother of all talks and with your team, which is a great team. Now, this is Mr. Trump.
Thank you very much, Viruel. I promise you, as long as God gives us breath, we'll still be talking. And after me, my good wife. And I have many children also. I don't know if I heard him correctly, but I thought he said he was locked up. I hope not literally. James Klugman, great name, says 30% of Israel's exports are blood diamonds stolen from the Congo via IDF-trained militias who commit genocide. Quelle surprise. And Aquila McCann says Professor Marandi has an analytical mind who can eloquently expose the myth that Israel wins war in the Middle East. Thank you, Professor Marandi, for revealing the truth. And Uzi 1mm says all those Musk cultists have spent years complaining about globalist elites like Bill Gates meddling in politics and hoarding wealth and power. Now they want one as eternal emperor of humanity. Good point. Rob Oz says Rutte looks like a cheap ventriloquist dummy, but with less intelligence. Perrine Zarafa sends $50 US. Thank you, Perrine. Says it looks bleak for Palestine under Trump. Time will tell. That's a fact. Well, look, let me take a quick break, and then it's the one and only Bryce Greene up next. Stay tuned. I defy anyone to contradict the point that I just made, that every person alive today was born of woman. So why would we say that the people in the labor wards, in the maternity units, are people who are giving birth? Why can't we say women? Why can't we say mothers? Why can't we say women who are breastfeeding, mothers who are breastfeeding? Why do we need to say people who are chest feeding? All of these words, and indeed all of the trend that you say you dissociate yourself from, of transgenderism, transmania, I call it, are all taking rights away from women.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, Vivek is the assistant to Elon Musk in the Trump administration. Well, I don't know. Both of them were tipped for higher things, put it that way. And breaking news, Trump appoints Al Capone as the head of the FBI. I'm only joking. Just Bryce Greene, independent writer, political analyst, and contributor to Fairness, and one of my favorite guests, joins me now. Bryce, joking apart, I mean, I'm presuming Al Capone isn't going to be the head of the FBI, but it's a motley crew that are being assembled on the Potomac, isn't it?
Quite. Trump ran an anti-establishment campaign similar to what he did in 2016, where he campaigned against American interventions in Syria, having troops and bases all over the world. And he took the anti-war lane against that war hawk Hillary Clinton, who was campaigning on escalating war with Russia. And that resonated with voters to the point where, he defeated her. But his presidency was very different than that rhetoric. He continued expanding drone strikes. He continued a U.S. presence in the Middle East. He continued a maximum pressure campaign, or started the maximum pressure campaign against Iran. He killed the main Iranian general who was actually fighting ISIS. All of this because he hired and surrounded himself with neocon war hawks. And this round, this version of Trump in 2024 did a similar thing. He told us that he was sick and tired of the U.S. wars and sick and tired of all the waste that's coming through the Pentagon. But then when he is elected president, he surrounds himself with the same group of people who was leading us into these wars to begin with. Just take a look at some of his picks for defense, some of his picks for the CIA. None of these people are peaceniks. None of these people are trying to reorient the American empire. No, what we saw was Donald Trump doing what he normally does, which is con people into believing one thing while doing the other thing while no one's looking. And I think we can expect more of that. We can expect that the bipartisan consensus on foreign policy will remain, despite all the rhetoric on one side or the other about who wants peace and who wants war. No, Donald Trump represents the establishment. Plain and simple, and we can expect that much of the establishment policies will continue or even escalate.
It's odd because he doesn't have to run again. He doesn't actually need anybody now. He doesn't need the special interest groups. He doesn't need the Israel lobby. 80% of American Jews voted for Harris. He didn't even get their votes, although he got $100 million from Adelson. The vast majority of the Israel lobby money went to Harris, his opponent. Why then? What is it? What's the alchemy involved because he strikes me as a guy who doesn't actually have an ideology himself, unlike these neocons. I saw him as a transactional sort of guy who wanted to do business, but he hasn't started off like that.
Well, yeah, you know, Trump doesn't strike me as the guy who even genuinely wants to be president, but likes having won the presidency and likes being known and likes being popular, certainly likes making money off of it. But it's hard to pin down what precisely motivates Trump. But we can see this with any administration, whether or not it was Trump, whether or not it was, one of the other Republican clowns running for president, whether or not it's Biden, whether or not it was Obama, whether or not it was Bush. There is one party when it comes to foreign policy, and they staff the think tanks, they write the papers, they write the bills that gets passed in Congress, and they write the policy that Trump is going to enact. And so, again, there might be an anti-establishment rhetoric that goes on with a lot of this, but I would love to be proven wrong. I would love to see a rollback of U.S. empire. I would love to see Trump take a hard line against Israel. I would love to see Trump wind down the proxy war in Ukraine. But every bit of his personnel choices indicates to me that that's not in the cards. Now, why? It's difficult to answer the question specifically why, but that's the default of American politics. If you don't have any special point of view about what America's policy should be in Africa or in Eastern Europe or anywhere in the world, really, you're going to default to that class of people who consider themselves experts on these topics. And in Washington, D.C., that class of people is unified behind expanding the American empire, increasing American influence abroad, and ramping up the new Cold War against China and Russia. Now, one of the main differences between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump on foreign policy was their position on the Ukraine war. But Biden's pick of Rubio as Secretary of State, or pick any of his picks, none of them indicate that there's going to be significant change in the Ukraine policy. The change in the Ukraine policy is going to come because Ukraine is losing and cannot possibly win this war. That's what's going to change the policy, not any anti-establishment credentials from Trump, not any desire to end the new Cold War, not any desire to reorient American policy. What we're seeing is that both Trump and Kamala, they both believe that the main enemy that the United States should be fighting against is China. And they both are in favor of ramping up tensions with between Taiwan and China. They're both in favor of arming the separatists in Taiwan, which could blow up into a nuclear war. This is a very dangerous policy that doesn't get critiqued much, but the fact is that both sides agree with it. And the same thing goes for Israel. The Israel lobby, while Trump may not have needed them explicitly, Trump certainly wouldn't be where he is without the Israel lobby, without the significant amount of funds, support, or at least the lack of an overt campaign against him from the Israel lobby. All of that is essential if you want to be successful in American politics. And the ending result is that both parties have an utter devotion to continuing Israel's genocide in Gaza. They want to continue to send weapons. They want to continue to back them in the United Nations. They want to continue to ignore international consensus about how this issue should be solved because they're supporting a rogue state, because America itself is a rogue state. And the foreign policy establishment for both parties is hell-bent on continuing that rogue state status.
Doesn't it all leave Kennedy looking a bit silly? Here he was going to swash his buckle. He was going to put Big Pharma and so on to the sword. He hasn't even got a gig yet, hasn't even got a title. At least Tulsi's now got a title. What's Kennedy getting?
I'm not really certain. The Kennedy campaign was interesting from the start. He had said some interesting things, some good things about the role of intelligence, the role of, the deep political system in shaping the American democracy. And he was launching some very good critiques of it. But very quickly, you started to see that he was involved with the very people that he claims to be against. His his campaign was financed by major Zionists, major supporters of Israel. On the Israel issue, I believe that he lost all semblance of credibility when he supported, not the way the Democrats did. He overtly said, what Netanyahu is doing is great and justified, and I hope he should keep doing it. That does not demonstrate to me someone who's interested in taking on the major power centers in America. I'm not quite sure what Robert Kennedy's motivations are. You had one of your callers earlier mention the fact that both his uncle and his father were assassinated by intelligence agencies, and that has to factor into his worldview somewhat. But the idea that you're going to get any sort of truth and reconciliation or any sea change in the political economy of this country through Donald Trump is simply laughable, and Robert Kennedy is surely smart enough to know this. So why is he doing what he's doing? You'd have to ask him. But he's certainly not an anti-establishment bastion that he would like people to think he is.
Now, the Democrats are not exactly showing signs of learning their lesson from what happened. The first spasm was to blame Latinos, blame men, blame black men. And of course, they had a lot of high-powered celebrities, though it turns out from the accounts that have been filed with the Federal Election Commission that they paid millions they paid Oprah Winfrey $1 million to tell us that democracy was in danger, but she needed to be paid $1 million in order to say it. They paid a group of hot-panted black girls that I'd never heard of before $5 million. They paid Beyonce $10 million, and she didn't even sing. So to what extent can we expect any real soul-searching on the Democratic side? I mean, if I was a leader of the Democratic Party, I'd be saying we lost because we're too pro-war, we're too pro-Israel, we're too pro-Wall Street, we're too distant from our blue-collar labor movement past. We have to reverse all these things. I doubt if anyone's saying that.
No one's saying that, but like you're saying, it's very obvious why they lost. When Biden came into office, there were, 5.2% of children were impoverished. When he left office, it was 13.7%. When he came into office, there were all sorts of protections for people. There was eviction ban, unemployment benefits, extra SNAP benefits, Medicaid expansion, student loan pause, all of these things, which were good and reduced poverty, they started back up under Joe Biden. The Democrats didn't make any effort to expand them or continue them going. Actual food insecurity has increased 40%. Actual poverty, and this is according to American government statistics, has increased 67%. This happened under Biden. If you want people to vote for you, you have to make their lives better. That's a simple axiom that I think any politician in any part of the world will understand. If you want support, make people's lives better. The Democrats didn't seem to have any interest in that. And to the extent that they did make people's lives better, there were some, things on the regulatory front that they did that were very good. They never talked about it. They didn't talk about it because they don't care about it. They don't care about it because they don't care about the voters. That's why they lost. And they don't care, and that makes them less deeply reflexive or deeply reflective when they lose. So, if I'm a Democratic consultant and someone's paying me millions of dollars to tell them why they lost the election, I'd say, well, you didn't make people's lives better. But they don't care about that. They don't have a vision of the future that they want to enact in the world. They're not trying to secure democracy. They're not trying to end poverty, end empire, end any of that. They don't care. They don't want to win. If they lose, the consultants, they keep their jobs. The Democratic Party establishment, they all keep their jobs. The politicians keep their jobs. The machine keeps on going. Meanwhile, the American public is suffering. And so all this hand-wringing about, why did we lose the election? How could we have done that? It's a farce. They know why they lost the election, because poverty increased by 60% under the guy that they were trying to, hold up as a shining example. That's why. It's simple.
Well, one sign of a lack of introspection is that many of them are saying Kamala Harris should run again in 2029, and that's surely a non-starter.
Oh, no. Are they actually saying that? Because if so, I mean, they seem to be committing political suicide. You don't lose 14 million voters from the previous election because you ran such a good campaign and you ran such a good candidate and the country's doing so much better off. You don't do that. Like, that doesn't make any sense. And they know this. But Democratic Party politics, unlike other, serious parties in the world, serious workers-based, workers' rights-focused parties in the world, they don't care about, what the policies are that are going to make people's lives better. They care about celebrity stuff. That's why they spent millions and millions of dollars on Beyonce and random podcasters that, we've never heard of. That's why they spent millions of dollars on Megan Thee Stallion. That's why they do all these things, because they think that the American voting public is stupid enough that while their jobs are being taken away, while the food is costing twice as much as it did 2 years ago, and while they don't have as much money in their pocket, while the economy is being destroyed, while their cities are being destroyed, oh, look, there's Beyonce. Everything's okay. They think that Americans are that stupid. And if they think that Kamala Harris is going to find more success by doing the exact same thing in 4 years, well, then it's because they want to lose. Or at least, again, they don't care about winning. And it's really embarrassing to see. And man, it's so bleak. But we're trying.
Bryce Greene, if they had any sense, they would hire you as a consultant. Not that you'd necessarily take the gig. Although, if the price is right, I'd advise you to give them
George,
some
if they
good
hired me
advice.
as a consultant,
Bryce,
I would tell them exactly what I told you. I would tell them, all you need to do is make people's lives better. How do we win election? Make people's lives better. Oh, we did some stuff. Well, tell people about it. They didn't do that. It's that easy. You can send me $1 million now.
Bryce Greene, thank you very much. I can't, but they should. Thank you very much indeed. Bryce Greene, independent writer, political analyst, and contributor to Fairness. Now, while I take a quick break, you have a look at this, my other show, Have It Out with Galloway. Join me every week to Have It Out with Galloway. We discuss the great issues of the day and occasionally the odd philosophical meandering through the meaning of life. You can be on the show by contacting us at our website, haveitoutwithgalloway.com. You can be the star of the show. Join me on Have It Out with Galloway. Come and have a go if you think you're hard enough.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
While Gayatri gets ready, let me talk with Jay in Florida about Jill Stein. Go ahead, Jay.
Good afternoon, George. Thanks for taking my call.
Welcome, sir. Go ahead.
So I was wondering if I could get your take on this outrageous interference by the European Green Party, signed on by 20-some-odd names, including, such famous luminaries like Baerbock and Pirate Schultz, among others, going ahead and signing a round robin to tell Jill Stein to sign out of the race and put her endorsement for Kamala Harris in an outrageous election interference bid.
Well, it was not just the European Greens, but the Canadian Greens also. That's because the Greens are really a rather rancid yellow. They actually support war throughout the world. They actually support NATO, and where they have political power, most notably in Germany, in the form of Anna Baerbock, they are up to their necks in blood. Not just Ukrainian blood, but Palestinian blood. Indeed, the blood of their own citizens who have the temerity to come out, who somehow imagined Germany had changed and that you could come out and peacefully demonstrate your opposition to government policy, only to be clubbed into the stones on the ground. That's what the Green Party in power is. They claim that we should all get out of our car and get on a bicycle, whilst at the same time supporting the blowing up of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, at the same time supporting sending more and more bombs, more and more rockets. They think that if a bomber has a rainbow flag on the tail fin, that somehow makes it better. That if a killer is a woman, that somehow makes it better. That if the LGBTQ plus agenda of which they are so enamored is in force, then war crimes, crimes against humanity, are things that you should turn your Nelson's eye to, turn your face away. So Jill Stein is the only Green political leader I would ever support. I despise the Greens. They are the gardening section of the Social Democrats. They're the gardening section of the Labour Party here in Britain, of little soldier Schulz in Germany. They are no more, no less than warmongers with green fingers. I despise them, Jay. Over to you. Last word.
I think you got it pretty spot on. I think Americans, such as my ignorant self, don't really know that much about the Greens other than what we know from what's gone on in Europe, and that don't look good. And Jill Stein never really, expounded upon what her green policies were going to be. She just kind of rolled in with the...
Thank God.
Well, yeah, rightly so.
Thank God for that. She stuck to the anti-war. She stuck to the anti-war message. If she'd told you her green policies, she'd have got even fewer votes. Jay in Florida, brilliant call. Thanks for that. I'm hurrying you on because, well, my good wife is here. What's rattling, Gayatri?
Well, that was a very short honeymoon period, Mr. Trump. Already disappointed us within 2 weeks. Goodness gracious, let's see what comes out of it. At the time when we asked whether he would make America great again, America, not Israel, Carl Mute, number 3, answered, Trump will be operating within the confines of a corrupt, outdated infrastructure and politics from the 1980s. There's only one way his presidency will be going. And Jacqueline Butler sent an email. The crux of it being, you may be happy that Harris has gone and that Blinken will no longer be around, but you have Kushner and the developer and Musk with his alignments in Israel. Nothing changes except the people chose, like as the face, as the president, and now the real power beyond will make their moves. And that reminded me of that Chinese lawmaker that we watched in the documentary about democracy. And he describes China as a country where there are no elections as such, and therefore the leaders and the parties don't change. But behind the screens, the policies adapt according to development.
In the West you can change the government, but not the policies.
You change
in
the
China,
government.
you can't change the government, but you can change the policies.
Yes.
And China actually changed its policies more dramatically, more radically than any political system ever. In history, they went from Chairman Mao to the kind of record-breaking, big capitalist power that they became, albeit still under the Communist Party, still with the government exercising a guiding hand to the economy, still insisting that the plutocrats, the oligarchy, have to answer to the government rather than the other way around. These are all important differences.
Yes, very.
But there's plenty of billionaires making billions in China. That would not have happened in the 1970s when China was a Maoist country. So that fellow was vindicated. But I want to ask you, in relation to the first communique you read out there, why is Trump imprisoned in an apparatus fashioned in the 1980s? Trump has won the biggest landslide in history, and he doesn't have to stand for election again. Nobody could be more powerful than that. He could kick over the money changers' tables outside the temple. He could flay the warmongers, literally flay them, physically flay them out on the White House lawn. Who's going to stop him? He's got everything. Popular vote, governors, House, Senate, Supreme Court, and the biggest Republican vote ever in history. A complete landslide. Nobody could have a more powerful hand to play than Donald Trump. And look at the bloody hand he's playing.
Have you taken note, Donald Trump and crew? Because he's got obviously a couple of more weeks before he actually gets inaugurated and takes office. So let's just hope he's got a few more surprises up his sleeves, positive ones. Now, in our poll, we were asking whether NATO will veto a Ukraine peace. And having just spoken about China, Andy Cooley says, it seems those in Europe, the UK and the US are indeed fascists who think they are fighting communism. But Russia is a capitalist economy and is now stronger than all three together. So what really is the reason for the Ukraine war? And Kash Nasser says, NATO will fight to the last drop of Ukrainian blood. The people of Ukraine deserve so much better, and that is very, very true.
Amen. Amen to that.
Very, very
true. I ask this question all the time. I know why they hated the Soviet Union. They hated it for all the reasons I loved it, right? But Russia is not the Soviet Union. Russia is a overwhelmingly white, Christian, capitalist country. So why can't you get along with it? Why couldn't you allow it into NATO when it asked? Why can't you allow it into the European Union when it asked? It is the biggest European country, after all. Moscow is the biggest city in Europe, after all. It's a country that is run on a system that you yourselves say is your system. Why couldn't you live with them? I honestly don't know the answer to that.
No, I don't know. And you know how shocking it is that this Russia hoax and this Russophobia travels so far and wild. Because, you know, we were at a hotel this weekend, and I ran into Congress and had a chit-chat with people who described Trump as a Putin apologist. Incredible.
Where does that even come from?
What does that even mean?
And why do they even care? Why are they thinking about Putin? You're living in a country that's going down the drain.
Well,
our own country is going down the drain. And you're obsessing about Putin? Are you crazy? Exactly. Sorry, that gets me so angry.
It is. And that's a very important point that you make, because Edgar Brenninkmeyer says, if NATO vetoes Ukraine, it commits suicide, it tears down the EU with it. Europe has to sort itself radically from the roots up, or descend again into the swamp of petty nationalism, or it will be the poor Western Peninsula of a booming and blooming Eurasia. Fact.
Yeah, I mean, Germany in particular. I mean, Germany had everything. They had generations of cheap, reliable, high-quality gas from Russia, on which they built that whole industrial power that made it the powerhouse of Europe. And they ripped it all up, blew it all up, literally.
All these plants are closing down. They're marked, the industries, marked
Volkswagen's closing down. Hitler founded Volkswagen. It's been the German people's car since Hitler. And it's closing down in Germany.
Now, we were talking about Ukraine, but what about this? Rob writes, it was the 2014 coup in Ukraine that opened my eyes to the corruption of Western media. Back then, channels like Russia Today and Al Jazeera debunked Western misinformation on almost a daily basis. Now I look at Georgia, and the Western narrative is very similar to what it was in Ukraine, but we no longer have channels available to give it a balanced insight. However, I suspect that Georgia might unwittingly become NATO's next front, with Russia as they roll over to Western interference.
Yeah, but the people of Georgia have spoken. It was a very decisive election result. I don't think their government will be overthrown, although all these European politicians are all beating a path there, standing there, complaining and demonstrating in a foreign country about the elections in that country. It's the same playbook, but I think that the government, and if it's any sense, it will ally itself with Russia, and it will ensure that it does not become another Ukraine. I mean, who seriously wants to be another Ukraine? Ukraine has already lost 25% of its territory. It's lost 1 million people. It's lost a million people who've emigrated out of the country. It's lost 1 million dead people. Who wants that for their country?
Exactly. Exactly. Finally, we have an email from Montenegro, from Radmila, who writes, "Esteemed Mr. Galloway, I'm so very happy to be one in 500,000 people who are blessed with an opportunity to listen to MOATS regularly."
How beautiful.
Thank you so much,
Thank you, Radmila. I appreciate it very much. So, are we going out for chips?
Let's go.
Andy Cully says, oh, I've lost him. So let's go to the calls. Salma is in Texas on Musk and Trump. Salma, welcome. She's not there. Let's go to Ken in California on UFOs. I'm always up for a discussion on UFOs, Ken. What have you got? Have you got a sighting to tell me about?
You know, I have seen a couple. I'm not sure if they were government drones or whether they were actual UFOs, but I've seen some shooting stars, you know, in certain situations that I needed some guidance. But anyways, I want to discuss, I do have some hope, you know, for the Trump presidency. Seeing Lauren Boebert discuss some of these conspiracies, you know, and she went a little far. You know, she discussed birds as being drones by the government, which was a little far, I'll admit. But some of the other conspiracies she talked about, like moon landing and some other things, I think was actually very important. She basically was saying, hey, I'm already on these government lists. Like, hey, like, I'm just going to go out there and just put myself on some more government lists. And the fact that she's a Trump supporter, I find just a small chance of hope. I firmly believe that Trump needed the Jewish vote because of how the media is done in the United States. And if he was starting to go anti-Israel, he never would have gotten elected. But now he's got the election. He has a real opportunity to change things. And I pray that he actually goes through with some of these situations, especially with surveilling Americans, you know, the limit of free speech. You know, I've experienced the limit of my own free speech, and I really pray that Trump actually changes his mind on Israel, and this would be a pivotal thing for him to do. And I know he has a chance. And this is the Mike Huckabee appointing of Mike Huckabee is actually interesting because he's the first non-Jewish person to be appointed as the ambassador to Israel.
He's not Jewish. He's not Jewish, but he could not be more rabidly Zionist. He is. He believes in the rapture. I've heard him play his guitar and sing songs looking forward to the end of times. He's a certifiable madman. On Jewish voter, first of all, 80%, 8 out of 10 Jewish voters voted for Kamala Harris. Half the Jews in America are opposed to Israel, are opposed to Netanyahu. the real pro-Israel fanatics in America, in numbers, are the evangelical Christians like Mike Huckabee. It's the evangelical Christians who are using the so-called Jewish state to bring about the end of times. More than half of Jewish young people under the age of 28 believe that Israel should not exist. More than half. So let's not talk about Jewish voters. Let's talk about the Israel lobby, pro-Israel voters. Most of them are Christians, and they are the weirdest possible brand of Christians you could possibly get. I'm talking the Reverend Jimmy Swaggart here. I'm talking the, what was the one that had a wife that used to appear, Faye? She was called Faye. I can't remember his name, but I'm talking about the snake oil. I'm talking about the snake oil version of evangelical Christianity. They're the people that love Israel the most. Not that they have many Jews in their golf clubs, that is for sure. Ken in California, I thought you were going to entertain us on UFOs, but we'll have to go to the far south, where Horiana is in New Zealand, and she will almost certainly be the last call. Horiana, welcome.
Hi. Kia ora, which is Māori for hello, George Galloway. I have enjoyed your
Kia ora to you too.
And I had the privilege to phone you this morning. I finally worked out a bit of time in terms of New Zealand time and wherever you are in the world that time. And now I've finally made contact. And I just wanted to say hello and to give my love and care to you and your family and to all the listeners through these harsh times within our global realm. And George, lots of love to you. I love listening to your voice, your show, and I promote MOATS TV here in New Zealand through the Scoop's independent news media. So hurrah to you, George. It's a pleasure talking with you, and I hope to talk at some other
Well, God
stage.
bless you. I really appreciate that. You have no idea how I appreciate it. I did a speaking tour of New Zealand once, and I met some very fine people there, and my meetings were extremely well attended. And I found it one of the most mesmerizingly beautiful countries that I have ever visited in the world, and very fine people too. A lot of my friends and my generation emigrated to New Zealand. There's a very large number of Scottish people in New Zealand, as indeed in Western Australia. And many of my footballing friends that didn't quite make it, as I didn't quite make it in the professional game in Britain, did make it in the professional game in New Zealand. Some very good friends of mine. If anyone knows Dave Brogan, ex-Cowdenbeath, who became a professional player in New Zealand. There was a lot of players from St. John's Secondary School, the best football team in my area, who eventually ended up as professional players in New Zealand. May God bless them all. I hope they've had a good, long, and happy life. Well, it wasn't Faye. It was Jimmy and Tammy Baker. I'm talking the Reverend Jimmy Swaggart. I'm talking Jimmy and Tammy Baker. You know the kind. Drinking the snake oil, skimming the collection, spending it on hookers, male and female. I think that it was Baker who used to pay from the collection a young man to give him crystal meth and a pretty severe rub down by way of a massage. I made the point at the time. You can hardly blame him. It was all going on behind his back. Well, we will always be in front of you. We will always be transparent and honest. And as I said the other night, If Trump does something good, we'll support him. If he does something bad, we will pour the same invective down upon him as we did upon Joe Biden and their predecessors. So please don't be upset if I'm talking harshly about somebody that you like. It's my duty to tell you what I really, really think. You'll never get snake oil from me. It's been marvelous for me. I hope it was for you. And if it was, come back on Sunday for the mothership, the mother of all talk shows. And don't forget my Have It Out with Galloway, a different kind of show, but equally worth watching. 4 million people watched us in the last 7 days. Let's make that 4 million again this time. Good night.